Just a reminder as you're joining us, just make sure your mics are muted, and we'd love to have your cameras on if that's possible. And Will is going to play a solo for us, it looks like. We're thrilled about that. No? And Matt, too, you guys are ready to play. I like it.
They're trying to show you that they're practicing, see?
That's right.
That's
Love
good.
it.
You know how to impress your leaders. That's an important skill to have.
Yes, it is.
How many more of these do you have, Sean, for the rest of the semester?
You're actually our last one for this semester.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, we're looking forward to your wisdom.
Okay, well,
send us into the holidays.
I can't make any promises. It's been a long month.
I can imagine it has. Yeah, and then next semester we actually have about half a semester where we can rehearse together, and we're doing a concert recording essentially. So it'll be the same thing next semester. We'll meet as a group, and for about the first half of the semester. Then after spring break, we will go fully remote, and I'll have some more guest speakers coming later in the spring.
How big of an ensemble are you using these days?
It has varied. So this semester, what we did was we split the band in half, and so we had essentially, between 20 and 25 in each group. Mm-hmm. And so we rehearsed separately and then came together for our culminating recording. And so that worked fairly well. Next semester, I'm planning on doing something a little bit different, more with chamber ensembles. And so that'll be a little bit of a different system than we did this semester. But
yeah, we're kind of in the same boat where we're recording concerts in the spring. We've been doing the same thing here, but we've been doing it mostly in our own rehearsal facility. But in the spring, we went ahead and rented halls. So we'll actually tape with like a 4 or 5 camera shoot concerts as though they were being performed without the audience, in smaller ensembles, basically 25, 30 people or less, right, so we can space out. And then the goal is to try to get to May. And if we're vaccinated enough by May to be able to have some live audiences, we have 2 big concerts scheduled in late May, one at a major hall here called Strathmore, which is like the Kennedy Center, and then at Wolf Trap, which is DC's version of Tanglewood, essentially, kind of a semi-outdoor venue. So I'm crossing my fingers. I've made a bet that those will be our return to live performances, but if not, we'll just kick the can down the road even further.
Sure.
But it's been weird. It's been weird for everybody, schools and professional groups alike.
It sure has, yeah. So when you do the 25 group, are you doing kind of normal band repertoire, or are you doing actually chamber pieces?
No, we're doing chamber stuff. So I'm not doing anything with reduced instrumentation like these adaptations. So what we've done is we've tried to go to all the major repertoire, chamber repertoire, so we can get it on tape. So the awesome bonus here is that we'll have on YouTube forever, recordings of the band playing Good Soldier Schweik and Symphonies of Wind Instruments and Creation of the World, things like that. Stravinsky. I'm doing an entire Stravinsky concert actually in February. So we'll do all the miniatures for both orchestra, strings, and winds. And hopefully that'll be a nice document to have, which we otherwise may not have done. We might have done a concert, but not a full produced shoot that now we can have. So it's a real heavy burden on our production team that they've been going nuts. But the benefit is that we're creating a library that we didn't have before. So.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a treasure. Wow, to have that caliber of player doing all of that music and having it on YouTube, that's fabulous. I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, me neither. Hopefully we can do it without anybody getting sick, and and then it'll be my fault that I did something that got somebody sick.
That's right. Awesome. Well, I think we're at the time to begin here. So we kind of had a soft beginning here, as everyone has heard us discussing, but welcome everyone. This is the UNC Charlotte Wind Ensemble, and probably a couple guests as well. And we're thrilled to have with us Colonel Jason Fettig of the President's Own Marine Band. I've already talked to you all and sent you information about him and what he does, and just really grateful, Colonel Fettig, that you gave us the time here to meet and to hear about some of your experiences and your path in music. So we'll go ahead and turn it over then to you, Colonel Fettig. Do you need to share your screen at all or not?
I don't think so. I don't really have
Okay.
anything that I could show you other than my living room here. I'm home. I'm home today, so
Yeah.
yeah. Let me start by just telling you a little bit about my background. I came from a musical background that's not dissimilar to what you all are going through right now. I went to a state school, University of Massachusetts, and I wasn't even sure I was going to study music. This is the interesting thing about, the position I'm lucky enough to have now is I could have ended up in 1,000 different places. I didn't decide I wanted to be a musician until I think my senior year in high school. And I'm a clarinet player, or at least I was a clarinet player, and played my whole life. I really loved it. And I had some success, but I was from New Hampshire, which is the music programs in New England are not as big as they are in the South. And so I really didn't have any idea if I was good or not, really is what it came down to. But got to my senior year and decided that I wanted to be a music teacher. And so I went to University of Massachusetts for music education and really liked the university. I wanted to go to a larger school rather than a conservatory for two reasons. One is that I thought that was better suited to me. I wanted to take other classes and kind of, round out my experiences and not just be really myopic about my music studies. And the second reason is, frankly, I didn't know if I could get into Juilliard or Curtis or Eastman. So in some ways, I didn't even try, which I would have regretted had I not been so lucky to end up in the career that I ended up in anyway. And I'll tell you more about that later. So I went to school and really had a good clarinet teacher, and he encouraged me to get a performance degree along with my music ed degree, which I could do. So I ended up getting actually 2 bachelor's degrees in my undergrad. But at that point, I had no idea if I was going to play professionally or if I was going to teach. I still was very focused on being a teacher. And to this day, I still love teaching and can't wait to get back to it in my next career. So I had these 2 degrees. I was practicing really hard. I was trying to prepare myself for whatever may come down the pike, but was kind of focused on teaching and maybe going to graduate school for conducting to help out that aspect of my teaching. Almost graduated UMass. The summer after I graduated, but before I student taught, I ended up playing for a group called the American Wind Symphony, which is a pretty well-known summer. They call it the barge band because the group actually plays on a big boat. The boat actually is going to be moved. I just saw an article about it yesterday that it's going to be moved. It's a very famous boat that was designed by a famous architect named Louis Kahn. And they're going to move the boat to New England, to New Hampshire, not New England, to New York to be part of an arts kind of school. But I played this summer festival, which was awesome. I mean, I get to play with all these other kids who were from different schools all around the country. And, we didn't make any money really, but it was just such an amazing experience. I was playing like 6-7 hours a day, doing a concert every day, practicing all the time, hanging out, traveling around the country. And I was in the middle of that tour, toward the end of that tour, and the boat broke down in Baltimore, Maryland. And one of my friends, who's a horn player, was in the band. He was at Peabody Conservatory at in Baltimore. So he had an apartment in Baltimore. So we stayed at his house for a couple days, and this was right up the road of DC, 40 minutes away from Washington, where I am now. And I was eating breakfast one morning and I spilled my cereal milk on this piece of paper. I turned it over. It was the Marine Band newsletter. We used to send out a paper newsletter. And on the back of this newsletter is an audition announcement for clarinet, which was happening in 3 weeks. So I thought this was interesting. And I had heard about the famous Marine Band, but I never heard them live. I didn't ever consider a career in military music. I didn't even know if I was going to be a professional clarinetist or not. But I saw this and I was intrigued, and I called that day. I called the Marine Band and I said, "Hey, would you send me the repertoire? Send me the audition stuff." I was just curious more than anything else. I wanted to see how hard it was. So they sent me the music out on the road, and I practiced for like 4 or 5 hours a day for the last 2 weeks of the tour, just trying to get ready. Finally got home. The audition was in 3 days. I got home to New Hampshire, and I decided I was not going to take the audition because I didn't feel ready, and I didn't want to make a fool out of myself by going down to this professional audition and sounding terrible and then being embarrassed. So I wasn't going to go. And my stepmother, who's not even a musician, said, "You've been working on this for a while. Why don't you just go down there? What do you got to lose? Just buy a plane ticket and go take this audition." So I pulled up my pants and I bought a plane ticket and I went down to Washington, D.C. And there were 100 other clarinet players there. And I walked into the warm-up room and everybody sounded amazing. And I was like, oh my God, I've never been in this kind of environment before. But, I had nothing to lose. I figured, well, we'll see what it's like. So did the audition, got past the first round. So then it was, I think there were 10 finalists at that point. Got to the end of the day, and for whatever reason, I won the audition. And my whole life got turned upside down because this was so unexpected to me. And now I had to decide, oh my gosh, am I going to take this opportunity to play clarinet maybe for a living and play in this famous band? Or am I going to continue on the path that I thought for myself? And it was two things at the same time. It was a huge boost of confidence that I had won this audition that I didn't even think I was qualified for. And then also I was scared out of my mind because this was such a weird and strange opportunity that I had not prepared my mind for. So I'll never forget this. This is a little side story. I didn't accept the job right away. They never asked, I don't even ask candidates today to accept the job. I said, think about it. This is a big commitment. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, and call me in a couple of days. So I left the audition, went back home. I went to the beach that weekend. I'll never forget this. And I'm lying on the beach with my friend, and I'm thinking about this. We're talking about it. And I suddenly I had this epiphany. I'm like, oh my goodness, I was just offered a job in the President's own United States Marine Band. Of course I have to take that job. So for you kids out there, this was before we all had cell phones. So I walked off the beach. I walked across the street in my bare feet, no shirt on. I went to a payphone and I called the assistant director of the band and I accepted the job from a payphone at the beach. And then I went back to my chair. I sat down on the beach and I'd never felt so good in my life. Here I am at the beach and I had just accepted this job in the Marine Band. But the reason I went through that whole story for you is because that day when I accepted this job obviously led to where I am now. I'm the director of the band. I never in a million years could have imagined that that's where I would have ended up. And I'll tell you a little bit more about how that happened in a second. But I think to myself, what if I had not taken that audition? What if I had just chickened out and said, you know what, I'm just going to be safe. I'm going to go do my thing. My whole life would have been different. Now, maybe I would have been great and I would have had a different life and a different career or a different place I would have ended up as a musician. But this job is perfect for me. And I've had so many amazing experiences. And it's just because of that one decision I made that day. And then subsequently at the beach, making that decision to take a job. So I got to the Marine Band. I'll never forget my first rehearsal. I sat down in the clarinet section. And actually, it just so happened that the first concert I played on was January of 1998. And Leonard Slotkin, the former music director of the National Symphony and Detroit Symphony, was our guest conductor. So my very first rehearsal with the Marine Band was sitting in the clarinet section with Leonard Slotkin on the podium. And I'll never forget that the first piece was George Washington Bridge that they called up. And the band plays it all the time. I played it in college, but it was college. So the band starts to play and I almost swallowed my mouthpiece because it was so amazing what I was hearing. First rehearsal, and it was just perfect. And everybody was just playing, and I didn't even play for about 10 seconds. I was just so floored by what was happening around me. Then I finally got into it and got my footing and had some success as a clarinetist in the band. And I thought, after a couple of years, I thought, this place is great. I mean, the musicianship is off the charts. There's so many cool things that we get to do. Front row seat for history. Got to go to the White House all the time, play for the president, play these concerts, go on tours across the country. So I thought, well, I'm gonna stay. I love playing clarinet here. I'm not gonna go to school for conducting. I'm not gonna be a teacher. I'll just be a clarinet player. And I put my kind of aspirations to maybe conduct just on the back burner. And 3.5 years into my career, one of the assistant directors retired. And for the first time in the band's history, the director at that time decided to hold an open audition for anybody in the band who wanted to apply and audition to be one of the conductors. I had never conducted a professional ensemble before. I conducted in college and in high school, but not at this level. And so, but I thought, again, what do I have to lose? I mean, I've already got a great job. I'm playing clarinet. Maybe I won't do well, but I feel like I've got a little bit of maybe some natural ability, and I just want to see what it's like. So I threw my hat in the ring. I applied for the position. Again, we had about 10 people apply. Everybody was senior to me in the band. I was one of the youngest and junior people, but everybody was really supportive and they encouraged me to try. Got past the first round, was in the final round with two other very senior people, seasoned conductors. And for whatever reason, Colonel Foley, who was the director at the time, he chose me. And suddenly my world was turned upside down again because I was very comfortable finally after 3 years playing clarinet in the band. Now I was thrust into being the junior conductor of the band and instantly made an officer and put out in front of the United States Marine Band and expected to be a great conductor. So freaked out a little bit. Immediately got back into graduate school. So I applied and got accepted to the University of Maryland and got my degree in orchestral conducting because I was not only conducting the band, I was also conducting our chamber orchestra. So I was living in both of those worlds now for the first time. And I had a really interesting 2 to 3 to 4 years trying to get my footing in how to be not only a conductor at the professional level of one of the best bands in the world, but also a leader. I was 25 years old, just leading people much more seasoned than I am, much more senior. And it was really a fake it till you make it kind of situation. I really had to kind of pretend that I had confidence and knew what I was doing, but I had to pretend in a way where I didn't seem arrogant or overstep my bounds and also be humble. And it was such a difficult transition to make socially, professionally. Um, but those years that I was an assistant director were so important because I spent 13 years as an assistant director here before I became the director. And I would not nearly be as successful as the director had I not had that time to learn and to make mistakes and to figure out what works and what doesn't work and to become a better conductor and get all that experience. That experience was the thing that gave me confidence and gave me the tools I needed to eventually, hopefully, find some measure of success when the baton was finally handed to me in 2014. So here I sit. It's 2020. I've been the director of the Marine Band for 6 years. And if you had asked me 20 years ago when I was graduating college, 23 years ago, if I thought that I might be the director of the President's Own and sit in the same shoes that John Philip Sousa once wore, I would have laughed in your face and told you to get out of my way. It would have been ridiculous. You can't plan for these things, and I guess the moral of the story for you guys is no matter where you end up professionally, you can have goals, and the goals are wonderful, but you will be surprised where you eventually end up. It's hard to know exactly where your lives will take you, and where your skills will take you. I mean, your number one job is to be as prepared as you can be when those opportunities come. And sometimes you make those opportunities, and sometimes they come to you naturally, and then your job is to seize them. So I didn't know that at the time. I just got lucky that I seized the opportunities when they came, and thank goodness I did. But I tell everybody I can at this point that, do it, find those opportunities and make sure you work your tail off so that when they come, you've done everything you can to be ready for that and be the one. And then let it take you where it's going to take you. And it'll probably take you in some really amazing places. And you'll move to different places that you could never imagined, and you'll have different jobs that you couldn't have imagined. And it's pretty exciting. It's stressful because I'm a planner, and I would have liked to have known where my life was going to take me 20 years ago, and I would have felt a lot better about that, but that's not how it works. So a lot of anxiety kind of came across in that way. But when I look back now, I realized that I probably worried a lot more than I needed to. All I needed to do was work hard, and just trust that the system and all that work would eventually pay off. So, I mean, talking a little bit about a career in military music, that was another thing. If somebody who knew me when I was 18, 19 said, hey, Jason's going to be a colonel in the Marine Corps someday, they would have laughed and laughed and laughed, because I was not a military kind of guy. I was not the kind of guy you would have said, oh, that guy's going to end up in the Marine Corps. But I love being in the military. And I didn't know that there were so many opportunities for music career in the military. Of course, we have the President's Own. I'm in the top band in the Marine Corps. And there's a premier band in every service that's in Washington, D.C. They're all fantastic musicians, but there are over 5,000 musicians in the military in general. And a lot of these bands are wonderful, and they're really fantastic opportunities. And if you are wired in such a way where you like kind of structure and you like rules and you like the tradition and history that goes along with that, in addition to being a musician and enjoying making music, the military is perfect because it has all these extra musical things that I really enjoy that have nothing to do with making music. And so to be able to be a musician in that kind of institution and really get involved in history and get involved in politics in a very non-political way, and have an opportunity to play for a lot of different people and play a lot of different kinds of music, that speaks perfectly to the way I'm wired. I didn't know it at the time, but it ended up being the perfect place for me. So I wish I had thought about military music a little earlier and really kind of considered that as an opportunity, because if I had not won the audition for the Marine Band, I wouldn't have known anything else about other opportunities that might have existed for me if this was not the place I was going to end up. So I think that that's a really important opportunity for you to consider if you can see yourself at all kind of operating in a structure, like the military environment. We're not combatants in the Marine Band, and most musicians in the services are not. They're not the first to go to battle. There is military training, basic training in almost all the other bands in the armed forces, but the musicians are really allowed to be primarily musicians in most of the bands in the country. And then there is a side kind of collateral duty that does come up occasionally, for rearward security or other things. But if you have any of that in your blood at all, it's an amazing opportunity because the security is incredible. I mean, look, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Musicians are out of work everywhere. They're out of job. They have no pay. They have no benefits. That's not the case with the military musicians. We're still gainfully employed. We're still doing everything we can to stay connected to people. I still have full military benefits from myself and my family. I've never known anything else. And I'm so grateful that I kind of stumbled into this career when this unforeseen crisis is hitting so many artists and musicians across the country. So it's definitely worth taking a look at, whether you are planning to be a teacher or planning to play professionally. These jobs are really incredible, and there's great stories. And I'll tell you a few of them later on in our hour, if you want. Before I go on, I mean, I guess, are there any questions, Sean, or anything about that you want me to elaborate on before we talk about some other things?
Yeah, actually, I would. My students often they ask when we have these. As I said, you're our third guest speaker. We had Virginia Allen, and then Joe Alessi, and now you. So we've had some really terrific, heard some great experiences. And the students are often interested in bumps along the road. In other words, what sorts of things did you encounter that maybe set you back, and how you recovered from that and kind of moved on. And particularly, I was interested since you were such a young conductor, as you mentioned, and working with senior musicians. There had to have been some experiences along the way where you felt like, oh my goodness, and you had to pick yourself up and keep going. If you could share maybe some of those experiences, that would be cool.
Yeah, there were a lot. In the first 5 to 7 years of being an assistant director, especially, there were a lot of bumps in the road. There was a lot of support that came from my colleagues because, they knew that in order for the band to succeed, they needed their leaders to succeed. They needed me to succeed. I couldn't fail without it having an adverse impact on the organization. So I got that support, but I made all kinds of mistakes. Trying to find the right temperature of how to be a leader, like I said earlier, without coming across as a know-it-all, beyond my experience, but also not being so concerned and so kind of scared and so unconfident that I didn't provide leadership. I didn't provide guidance. That balance was really hard. And I remember being in a couple of early meetings with people, senior people who were at the end of their career, and trying to find the right words to say as they were, going to retire, and they didn't necessarily want to retire. They wanted to stay longer. And I remember one point I tried to be, I tried to be a grown up and say, I know that this hurts, and it's not what you have wanted, but it's really for the best. And I said exactly the wrong thing, not only because it was the wrong thing, even if I had been where I am now, I would never say that now even, but also because it was like, I got the feeling, who are you? And why are you telling me this? You've been here for 10 minutes. So those kinds of lessons were really important to step in a big pile of poop, and to acknowledge that it felt awful and I wish I had done that, but then to remember, okay, why was that the wrong thing to say? Now, the tricky part, the hardest part, I think this is what you're getting at a little bit, is how do you learn from those lessons without it crushing your soul, without it crushing your confidence, without it making you feel like you don't belong and you're not good enough? That is really, really hard. And there's 2 ways to get around it in my experience. One is to try to keep perspective as much as you can. It's going to feel awful in the moment when you make a mistake, but then you have to immediately, figuratively and literally step back and say, okay, how big of a deal was that really? Because there are really big mistakes in life, and then there are kind of relatively inconsequential mistakes. They just feel like they're horrible at the moment, but they're actually not that bad. So putting that mistake or that thing you said or that thing you did or that, recital you gave that wasn't great. Okay, so it wasn't great, but how big of a deal is that? What is it going to feel like 20 years from now, 10 years from now? And you'll tell yourself more often than not, well, it's not going to feel like anything. Who cares? But right now it feels awful. So putting that in perspective is really important. And you've got to make a deliberate choice to take a minute, to take a breath and try to find that perspective. The second thing that helps, and it just automatically happens as you get older and as you get more experience, is as you have successes, which you inevitably will, file those away in your mind. Remember those successes. Remember that performance you gave that was really good. Remember that leadership thing or that public that public speaking thing you did where you actually did pretty well. Remember that, because those are the things that fight against the failures. So the more successes you have, the more you feel like, okay, I did pretty well there. I am pretty good. I was prepared. I didn't get too nervous. That's confidence. You're building confidence. You're putting that confidence in the bank. And so when you make a mistake, that's one mistake against 7 or 8 or 10 or 12 successes. And so it helps you to realize that that mistake doesn't define me. My successes define me. And then I had a little bit of a setback. But you're making a withdrawal from that bank, but you're not withdrawing the whole balance. You're withdrawing a little portion. So the more you work, the more you succeed, the better you get at your job, at your instrument, at public speaking, at leadership, at anything. The less the mistakes really impact your psyche and make it and come feel all encompassing. But you have to also acknowledge that. You have to remember, okay, yeah, I am pretty good. So I don't need to feel so bad about this one mistake I made. So I make mistakes all the time still. I say the wrong thing. I do the wrong thing. I make a decision that ends up being the wrong one. But now in my career, I'm able to say, okay, I made a mistake there. I'm going to own it. I'm going to learn from it, but I'm not going to let it ruin my life, because I've been very successful in these other areas. And I know that this was an anomaly. So it's gotten in some ways easier to make mistakes without it being, without me blowing it out of proportion. Now, the flip side of that is, as you move up in your careers and as you get more and more responsibility, the mistakes are more consequential. So making a mistake when you're early in your career is not a big deal, but making a mistake when you're a colonel in the Marine Corps can lead to severe consequences. So you need that confidence more than ever, or else it would crush your spirit. So luckily, those two things kind of work in tandem as you get older and older and more experienced. But we all feel it. Look, I felt it when I was younger. There was the whole reason I almost didn't come to the Marine Band audition, is because I didn't want to fail. I mean, how silly is that? Who would have cared if I had failed? Nobody would have noticed. No one would have given me crap about it. I would have forgotten about it a year later. But in the moment, it felt so real and so important. It felt like the most important thing in the world is I don't want to lose. I don't want to fail. And I had to overcome that to have the courage to go and then to ultimately succeed, which I didn't know I was going to, but I did. So just keep perspective and trust that your successes are ultimately going to define you and will help work against those mistakes you make. And then the third part about this, and this is the hardest thing, is don't be afraid to own them either. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody says something stupid. Everybody has a bad day. Everybody plays a bad, concert. It happens to everyone without exception. So if it happens, just own it, figure out how you can fix it, and then move on and look to the next day. And it will get easier. I promise you.
That's awesome. A number of the students also were just curious about the audition process of the particularly your band. I think there's some interest, of course, but I think that probably it's different with different bands and different levels, I assume, right?
Yeah, there's a couple different processes in the military I can speak to. Our process is very much like every orchestral process that you see across the country. So one of the unique things about the Marine Band is that we do what they call a cattle call. We don't pre-screen applicants by their resume and then invite them or not invite them to our audition. So if you meet the criteria to serve in the military and you're old enough, you can come audition for us and we'll hear you live. Which I think is a really important quality of the way we do auditions. It takes more time. Obviously, it takes like a couple days to get through all 150 people that might show up, rather than just doing it in one day or one afternoon. But I think it gives everyone an opportunity to come and experience that, which I think is important. I mean, it's hard to be successful at auditions until you take auditions, because you don't know how your body is going to react to that environment. And it's weird and it's stressful and it's kind of a very specific experience. And like anything else, it's like skydiving. I mean, we're all, I don't know about you, I'm scared of skydiving. I've never been skydiving, but if I did it once, then I would know what it felt like, and then I'd be less nervous the next time. It's the same thing with auditions. So go and take an audition, even if you don't think that you're qualified. If they'll hear you, go take it, because then you'll know what that feels like and you'll do better the next time. And who knows, maybe you'll do great the first time too. So I think that experience is important. It's a public service, I think, for us to offer budding professionals and music students like you an opportunity to come and audition if you want to, and not be weeded out because your resume is not that impressive. By the way, if we had a process where we pre-screened, I would not have been invited to the audition that I won. So that's the second part that I think about. I think I was invited to an audition that I shouldn't have been, and I won. How many of those musicians are out there as well that I want to hire, that don't look super impressive on paper, but they play great and they're perfect for this job. And I don't want to miss that opportunity to hear that person and have them win that audition. So that's the way we run our auditions. Other bands do the same thing, but a lot of bands have a different process, which has pros and cons. Their process is they do pre-screen, they do accept tapes from people, and then if your tape is good, they'll invite you to a final in Washington, D.C. The bad part is that, of course, you have to send in a tape, so you don't get to play live unless you're invited. The good part is that they actually, I think, will pay for your trip to DC to come if you're in the finals. So you'll actually get your trip funded if you're one of the finalists. We don't do that. You have to find your own way to Washington, and everybody pays their own way. So those are the two general ways that auditions run. For our audition, when you come to an audition for us, you come in. It's basically first come first serve. So we come as people show up, we schedule them on the day, and then we'll give you an allotted time. So if you showed up 3 hours into the process, your time might be in the afternoon, and say you got there at 10 o'clock. We'll say, hey, come back at 2, go sightsee, go practice, go eat lunch, whatever you want. Come back at 2, and that'll be around your time. And everybody in the first round gets about 5 minutes. So no matter what's going on, we try to give everybody that 5 minutes to play through the excerpts that we have designated and get comfortable and show what they've got. We do the first round behind a screen. So we have no idea who you are, male, female, anything, age, doesn't matter. We just are judging completely on the playing. If there is no conflict of interest for the final rounds, i.e. no family members or close, people have associations with the band, we'll take the screen down. One of the reasons we don't screen in the last couple of rounds is because in the military, there are other considerations that are important in addition to your playing. Height, weight requirements, if you're too far over the weight limits, we need to know that so that either it might become a showstopper or it's just something that we can say, hey, you're qualified for the job, but you're gonna have to lose this weight, and it helps us to be able to see that. And also, I think it is nice to be able to see the way people make music. I think there is something, whether you're in an orchestra or a band, the way that you communicate through your body when you're playing, I think is an important piece of information too. It's not the most important piece of information, but it is helpful. So those final rounds are usually not screened at that point. And there's either 2 or 3 rounds in our auditions. So sometimes if we have over 100 candidates, we'll do 3 rounds. We'll whittle it down to about 10% typically of the total number. So if there are 100 people, we'll try to find 10 of those 100 that will advance to the next round. Generally speaking, there's not a hard and fast rule. Sometimes it's 12, sometimes it's 6. It just depends on who's qualified. And then after that semifinal, then we'll whittle it down to maybe 3 or 4 finalists, and then we'll hear those people, and I'll pick a winner, and sometimes a runner-up as well. The rounds get longer as you go. So the first round's 5 minutes, the second round might be 15 minutes, and the last round's usually about a half an hour per candidate. We do sight reading, we do some ensemble playing, we kind of put you through your paces in that final round. The first round really is designed just to see, does this person have the general qualifications for our group? Do they play in tune? Do they play mostly the right notes? Do they have a nice sound? Do they have good time? Kind of fundamentals are the most important thing. You should always be musical. You should always show who you are as a musician in any audition. Sometimes the people behind the curtain will like it. Sometimes they won't. But if you are not musical, if you're super safe and robotic, that will almost always count against you, because no one wants an unemotional musician. So be who you are, play your music. If you miss a note in the first round, you are not automatically disqualified. There have been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people I have hired over the years. I might be exaggerating. There's 100 people I've hired over the years that did not play a note perfect audition, did not always play in tune, did not, do everything perfectly. I can tell when you're a seasoned, accomplished, versatile musician, even if you make mistakes. And so don't get down on yourself if you take an audition and you miss a couple of notes. That does not mean you're out. It really doesn't. If you don't play with a great sound and you don't play in tune and you don't play in time, you're not going to win an audition. So those things are really important. Playing with the metronome, always working on your sound, playing high, playing low, playing fast, playing slow, and always keeping a beautiful sound is 100% the very most important thing in the world. Because if you have a sound that's a little sketchy, or it's not refined, or it changes as you go up and down your instrument, you could play the best notes of anybody. You can play in tune, you can play great rhythm. You're not going to be hired. You've got to play with a beautiful sound all the time. That's really, really important. And then after the first round, where you kind of show those fundamental abilities, then it gets harder. Then in the subsequent rounds, I might ask you to do different things. I might ask you to play slower or faster, or play with a different articulation, or to change the color of your sound for a certain piece of music, or to think of it in a different way. And the reason I'm doing that is not only because I'm trying to see if you can kind of get closer to what we do here, I'm also testing how versatile you are and how flexible you are. Because if you're a musician who just learns things by rote and just drills something over and over again one way until you've got it exactly the way you want, that can be impressive. But the more impressive thing is being able to do it in a lot of different ways because you've got all the tools, the fundamental tools that allow you to do that. I want to know that. I don't want to know if you can play one thing one way perfectly. I want to know if you can play it really well 5 different ways. If you can do that, you will very much impress me. And I will believe that you are a really accomplished musician who's on that next level. So be prepared for that. As you practice and as you learn music, certainly learn it the way that you hear it and the way that you believe it, but make sure you can play it other ways too. Make sure you can play it a little bit faster and a little bit slower and a little bit softer and a little bit louder than you do it normally, because you might just be asked that in an audition, and that might be the thing that decides whether you win or don't win that particular audition. So by the time we get to the finals, I'm asking all kinds of things of the candidate. I'm kind of putting them on the spot. We are throwing some sight reading at them, which does not have to be perfect, but it is important for me to know that a candidate can sight read, because sight reading tells me something about their musicianship. It tells me how quickly their brain is moving, how quickly they're able to make mistakes and then correct the mistakes. Sometimes I'll have somebody go through a sight reading excerpt and they'll make 6, 7, 8, 10 mistakes, miss a key change, miss a dynamic. I'll say, take a second, do it again, because I want to see how many of those mistakes they can correct on the second pass. That tells me a lot about their musicianship and how quickly their brain moves and how much they hear mistakes and then can make the determination to fix it. The last thing I'll say about this, it sounds like a lot of criteria and a lot of stressful kind of qualities, but that's the kind of bar that you need to meet to be a professional musician. But I will tell you also that without exception, everyone who has won a job in the Marine Band, to include myself, once they won that job, they've become infinitely better musicians as they got into the job. So we're all raised by the level of things happening around us. No matter where you are elevated, and your skills are elevated by those around you. And it's so much of a collaborative team kind of environment, even at the professional level, that the clarinet player I was the day I joined the Marine Band was very different than the clarinet player I was 4 years later. And I recognized that, I could feel that. And so there's always room to even get better, and you'd be amazed at what you're able to accomplish as you get into these different environments, as your careers progress, and the standard goes up and up and up, and how your standard moves with that naturally. It's really kind of a cool process, actually.
Thanks for that. That's awesome. So if you wanted to go ahead and continue then with, I don't know what you were going to talk about next, but we're happy to move on to what you were going to talk about.
Yeah, I want to talk about fun stuff. We talk about auditions and all the stuff that freaks us all out, but the fun stuff is making music, and I hear all the time, in the professional music world, how jaded professionals can get. And, in the orchestral world, oh, I got to play Beethoven 5 again, and there's this kind of, I think it's a myth to some degree that people just lose their passion in music. I do think it happens for some people, but it certainly has never happened for me. And I'm reminded every day in this job, and especially now during this awful crisis, just how much I love making music and how grateful I am to be able to do it for a living. I'm in a job where, the audiences and the kind of environments we play in are so unique that they're just like, it's palpable every single time we perform. But I wanted to share some of that with you, because I think that I remember when I was in college, I remember just feeling sometimes getting a little down. You're just in the practice room all the time. You're trying to write papers. You're trying to do all your schoolwork. You're trying to prepare for all these different things. You got your lesson in a couple of days and you're stressed out about it. And I think it can be very easy to forget why we're putting in all of these hours, why we're taking so much of our time and our mental energy to do this. And I wanted to encourage you to stick it out, because it is worth it. It's really worth it when you get to that point where you really feel like you have gotten to a place where you're really good at what you do. You're ready to do it for a living. You're ready to do it every day. And then the payoff is that it's an amazing experience to do that and to share it. So I think it's important to remember why we make music, and especially for you and even for me, to ask yourself that question all the time. Why am I doing this? And whatever that answer is, it could be the way it makes you feel. It could be the way people respond when you share your musicianship. It could just be, something as simple as it makes you feel like you have an identity. But any of those things are valid, and maybe all of them are valid. But remind yourself of that, because it is a lot of work, and it is a very unique skill that you have, that we all have in this profession. It's not so few people that can do it, and it's really hard. But what I've learned over the last 20 years in this job is it's so worth it. I have a job right now that's a little bit split down the middle. I'm half a musician and half an administrator and a leader. So as a colonel in the Marine Corps, I'm in charge of 180 people. I'm in charge of their well-being, their career advancement, their happiness, their morale, their family's well-being and health. And especially during now, I've spent most of my time just trying to take care of people and keep them healthy, and keep the organization engaged, and connected with people, but also not putting my people in peril. And that's been an incredibly difficult situation. So that part of the job, I enjoy it because I know it's for the benefit of the musicians I work with and of the organization that I'm entrusted to take care of. But I always look forward to getting back to being a musician. I always look forward to getting to conduct concerts and getting to perform for real life people. And I have never lost that feeling of how amazing that is, whether it's at the White House or in tour concerts across the country, or even here locally. It's so much fun to make music at this level and to share it and to watch people respond to it. And I guess what I want to say is I'm grateful that I haven't gotten jaded. I'm grateful that I haven't thought that this is just a job and I got to go make music again. I still enjoy it as much as I did the very first time I conducted or I played with this band. And I think as I get older, the thing I enjoy most about it is how people respond. I enjoy most for performing for people and watching them light up and watching them kind of have that kind of epiphany and that emotional connection. And one of the things I've realized, and I want to share with you all, is that it's less about you playing your instrument and how well you play it. That's important, but it's more about people. What people really want is they want an emotional connection. They want to see you putting your heart and soul into something, and they live vicariously through what you're sharing with them. And even music that they don't necessarily like, we play music sometimes. We have a tremendously wide variety of music we play in the Marine Band, from patriotic stuff because we're a military band, to new music and commissions and contemporary stuff. And not everybody likes everything. And one of my challenges is trying to make sure I program properly for our different audiences, which could be 4-star generals, it could be the farmer in Iowa, it could be music students like you guys. It's really hard. But even if it's a piece that somebody doesn't like, what they love about watching the Marine Band play is they love the uniforms, they love the tradition, they love the pageantry, and they love watching professional musicians emote and communicate with them through music and do it at a very high level. And so I try to highlight that wherever I can. I try to highlight that human connection. And I think in my position that one of the ways you will be successful is not only by being the best instrumentalist you can be and really being a master of your craft, but being an empathetic musician, being a musician who's not afraid to share how you feel about what you do with people, whether it's through your instrument or just talking about it. Talking about what you do and talking to audiences and giving the dreaded lecture recitals, whatever else, that is a skill that is not just put on your plate because it's a check in the box. It's actually really, really important. Some people are naturally good at it. They're just personable and feel comfortable in front of crowds. Other people are more shy, more introverted, and it's harder. If you're one of the latter people, I encourage you to really work on it. Like really practice getting comfortable talking about what you do with confidence and passionately and with emotion and being a human being for people, because that audience connection is 50% of the success of being a musician. The other 50% is, of course, being great on your instrument. And the older I get, the more I am convinced that that is what's going to keep our profession alive and keep people engaged. And if you're going to be a teacher, that's exactly the same thing you should be teaching your students. What I'm telling you now, show that to them, model that to them, encourage them to come out of their shells and speak about it. Make a place that's safe in your bands and your orchestras, that kids can feel comfortable, being vulnerable with each other and being empathetic to each other's feelings. They're not only going to be better musicians and have more fun in band, but they're going to be better human beings and better professionals as well. I think it's a side that we sometimes miss. We're in our little rooms, we're focused on just the technical aspects of our studies, and we miss the human part of it, which is why band is so important, why large ensembles are so important, because it's an opportunity to just be free to actually, within 25, 30, 40, 50 people, be connected and to share vulnerability with each other, and to talk about it, and to not be afraid to kind of engage in that together. And then, that's what we do as professionals here as well. So to sum up a ramble, I just think that when you get down and when you feel like, why am I bothering, go back to the fundamental of why you started doing it in the first place, and go back to the thing that is most important to you as a human being and how it makes you feel. And that'll help motivate you to keep practicing, to keep working on it. The other thing I want to say, if you're considering, as you're all considering careers in music, is not only, like we talked about, taking advantage of opportunities, but diversifying your interests and your skill set. In today's musical society and culture, the more ways you can share music, and more ways you can kind of demonstrate things that you are passionate about, the better. I have musicians who do a lot of different things, and they're good at all of them because they find their interests, and then they work on bringing those interests to fruition. So I have a classical trumpet player, for instance, who came in, and great classical trumpet player. He taught himself how to play jazz, and he got a master's degree in jazz while he was in the band. So now he's one of our jazz trumpet players. And about 5 or 6 years ago, he said, you know what, I want to learn guitar. And he really liked guitar. And so he taught himself how to play guitar. And he is now a phenomenal classical and jazz guitarist. And he plays guitar professionally for us. So he's at the White House now. We're at the White House every day for the whole month of December doing these holiday parties. And he's a part of a guitar violin duo that he founded. And he's there every day playing for the president on guitar. He's a trumpet player, and he's still a professional trumpet player in the band. But not only has he found stuff that he's really interested in, he gets to play guitar, he gets to play jazz, he gets to play classical, but I can use it. It's become a huge part of our success in the Marine band. So it's a win-win. And if he had said, you know what, I'm interested in that, but I'm just going to focus on being a trumpet player, none of that would have happened. So he's more valuable to the organization. He's happier. So do the same thing, whether it's in music or something else. If you have a passion for something, or you enjoy something, find those connections to what you're preparing for as a career, and then work at them, because you never know when that will become an important part of your success as a professional. Certainly in a band like mine, that's the case. So that's another piece of information that I wanted to share with you and just encourage you. I know there's only so many hours in the day, but that could be a huge part of your education as you move forward. I don't know, you want to hear some stories from the White House? Okay.
Yeah, we would love that. Yes, absolutely.
So, this is kind of connected to what I was talking about a minute ago, just about, the human connection, and about kind of realizing why we do this in the first place, and how music makes us feel, and how you can have these experiences. Well, I've been so lucky to have dozens of these kinds of experiences all across the gamut. On the military side, I've been moved so many times by going on tour and having a whole row of like World War II veterans sitting in the front row. And I remember one time, I think we were in Montana, and we played a concert, and there was this guy sitting in the front row. And, of course, at the end, we played the Armed Forces medley, and he was a Marine, and he stood up. He's like 90-something years old, stood up for the Marines hymn, and stick straight, and just, crying. It's just an amazing experience. I talked to him afterwards, and he wanted to talk to me. So I saw him backstage. He was an Iwo Jima veteran. He was on Iwo Jima when the Marines stormed Iwo Jima during World War II. And he started telling us stories about Iwo Jima. Of course, it's just textbook to us in this generation. We don't know about it, but he's telling us these stories about landing. And he was a musician, and his friend was a musician, and one of them brought one of their instruments, and they were playing on the island after the first night. And I had half the band gathered around this guy. We were holding the buses so he could tell us these stories. And at the end of that, he gave me a vial of sand from Iwo Jima that he had collected 75 years ago, and he had it this whole time. He was so moved by the concert and so grateful to be able to tell his stories that he gave us this vial of sand from Iwo Jima before he left. And I just thought, what an incredibly beautiful gesture from this hero, from our greatest generation. And I'm just a musician, and I got to have this experience and this camaraderie and this kinship and connection with this 93-year-old Marine, just because of music, because he came to the concert and he was moved by the music, and that brought him back to that place. And This is nothing I would have experienced if I had ended up in an orchestra or if I had gone in a different career field. It was just a completely unique experience to being in this band. And that kind of thing has happened all the time. I look forward to those moments more than anything when we go out and meet people across the country. The military part of it, which has nothing to do with Schwantner or Hindemith or any of the great music we get to play. It has to do just about a musical and a human connection with somebody from a different world than we've lived. And then there's the White House. The coolest thing about the White House for me is that we get to meet and collaborate with celebrities all the time. And so often it's them who are super excited to be there. So I'll tell you a couple stories. One happened, one of the very first times, well, I'll tell you 3 stories. So I might tell you 4. So I'll keep them short. So this was early on in my tenure. I think it was my second time at the White House as a director. So this was a good bad one because it was the time that I had this really cool experience, and then I also made a huge mistake at the White House. So I made the mistake first, which is that I was conducting the band, and it was President George W. Bush, who was very nice to the band, always came out and said hello. He always called us, hey man, hey buddy, how you doing, Colonel? Good to see you. Actually, I was a lieutenant at the time. So the way it works in the White House is we play music for the background for all the crowd. And then at a certain point, the president comes out and gets ready to go into the East Room. And we play Hail to the Chief, but we play Four Rifles and Flourishes first. So if you watch the inauguration in January, you'll see the Marine Band down below the presidential dais. You'll see me conducting, and you'll hear us. We always play Four Rifles and Flourishes. Dum ba da dum ba da da, dum ba da dum ba da da, dum. We do that 4 times. And then there's an announcement, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and the First Lady or whoever else. And then we play Hail to the Chief. So we always get a cue from somebody in the staff that the president's ready, and you could play the Four Rifles and Flourishes because that's the announcement that then leads to the announcement. So nothing can happen until the musical cue. So President Bush came out of the Blue Room, and he's standing there about 10 feet from me. And he said, how you doing, Marine? Good to see you. I said, Mr. President, I'm doing fine. How are you tonight? He's like, doing great. And he looks around. He's like, we're ready to go. Go ahead. So I'm like, okay. He's like, yep, go ahead with the music. We're ready to go. There's no one around. I mean, everybody's in the East Room, no staff. And I got the President of the United States. He's ready to go. And George W. Bush was infamously impatient. He wanted to kind of get things going. So I said, yes, Mr. President, yes, sir. Shump ba da dum ba da da, dum ba da dum ba da da. Got to the end of it, silence, nothing. So President Bush, impatient President Bush, starts walking. He wants to go into the East Room and give his speech. So I hear it was about what felt like a minute, but it was probably about 5 seconds of nothing. And then I hear, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and Mrs. Bush. Bum, bum, ba-dum, bum, ba-dum, 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 bum. So I got him. He goes, doors closed. I'm like, yes, I did it. My second White House job. I sent the president into the East Room. So then a staffer comes running out of the East Room, and he comes right up to me. He's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I said, I'm playing Hail to the Chief. He's like, who gave you the cue to play Hail to the Chief? I said, well, the president gave me the cue. And he said, I'll never forget this. He looks at me and goes, you don't take your cue from the president. So my heart immediately sank. Here I am, a young conductor. I have done something. So what I apparently had done is I had sent the president into the East Room probably about a minute too early, which would have been fine normally because he was ready to go, but several of the guests were not seated yet, the guests of honor, to include a very elderly Charlton Heston, who was hobbling his way to the stage on national TV while President Bush came into the East Room to my music, and he had to walk over to the side of the room, help Charlton Heston to his seat, and then come up to the podium to give his speech. And everyone knew that something had gotten screwed up and that I had sent them in too early. So this is one of those classic examples. The only reason anybody remembers this is because I'm telling you this story right now. No one cares. It's not a thing. It's not written in a history book. It happened and then it was done and it was probably forgotten about the next day. I felt like my career was over. I felt like I had made a monumental effort, a monumental error that was going to ruin the presidency and ruin the Marine Band for life. Not the case, but it felt like that at the moment. So I felt awful. I had to pick myself up and remember and remind myself that, it was going to be okay and it's not the end of the world. But also ask me how many times in my last 23 years I have ever sent the president into the East Room early again. Never. And believe me, there have been dozens of times where a president has said, I'm ready, let's go. And I've had to say, Mr. President, I appreciate that, but we're not quite ready for you yet. But I never would have said that had I not made that mistake and been confident that I knew what the right thing was to do now, and I was going to hold my ground, even in the face of a president who was saying that they wanted to go. So that was the mistake. That same event, Charlton Heston came out at the end, and we just happened to randomly playing "Climb Every Mountain" from Sound of Music. And as he walked by to climb every mountain, his whole entourage came up to me and said, "Oh, it's so perfect that you chose to play Climb Every Mountain for Mr. Heston's departure. It was such a grand, cinematic, wonderful moment." And I said, "Ma'am, you're very welcome. It was our pleasure." Of course, it was completely random. I had not planned that at all. So two other stories, and these are happier stories. One is from the author Harper Lee. So Harper Lee wrote To Kill a Mockingbird. She was being honored by President Bush. This was toward the end of his tenure for her work. She was getting a Medal of Freedom, and I knew that she was going to be there. And we often try to tailor the music to our guests. So I included the soundtrack to the great movie starring Gregory Peck from 1954, I think it was. Elmer Bernstein wrote the score. It's gorgeous. If you don't know it, go listen to it on YouTube. Score to Kill a Mockingbird. So we had it for orchestra. The orchestra plays inside the White House most often. So it's a chamber orchestra. So it was gorgeous. It's perfect. And I thought, well, if Miss Lee is anywhere around, I'll play this for her. Maybe she'll recognize it. You know, it's been a lot of years, but she obviously, I mean, she must have been involved with the movie at some point. So she's in a wheelchair. She came into a different way. I didn't see her at all for the entire event. And so we had this music. So at the very end of the event, I thought, well, we don't want to waste it. Let's just play this. So we pulled up To Kill a Mockingbird. We started playing, and it begins with a little piano solo and a flute solo. And we had just started playing, and she comes flying out of the state dining room in her wheelchair like this, 100 miles an hour. And she comes right up next to the podium, and she had like 20 of her family members with her. She was famous for never giving interviews. She was very, very much a recluse when she was alive. And so she sat there. We played this 10-minute collection of themes from To Kill a Mockingbird, and she's just bawling. Harper Lee, the Harper Lee, is right next to me, having this incredibly emotional experience. Finished up the piece, and her whole family is just so emotional. She got up out of her wheelchair, gave me a kiss on the cheek, and said, "Thank you, darling. That was the best thing I've ever heard." Sat back down, wheeled out, and that was it. But it was just like, what a gift we were able to give to her, Harper Lee, through music, just totally randomly, and that she knew every note of that score. And there's a similar story to that, which is kind of the same thing, but a more modern celebrity. We were at the White House about 6 or 7 years ago, Obama administration, and Meryl Streep was one of the honorees at this point. So we had put together through our arranger a whole collection of famous themes from Meryl Streep's movies, Out of Africa, Sophie's Choice, things like that, Bridges of Madison County. And same thing. I thought, okay, if Meryl Streep is anywhere near the orchestra, we'll play this, and it would be super cool if she hears it and she recognizes it. And we can have a little moment with Meryl Streep maybe in the crowd. So we're going to the White House. We're in the White House warming up. We're tuning. Nobody's there. No press. No guests. Just totally empty, which happens every time. And then the gates will open and everybody will come up the stairs, and that's when we start playing. So we're just sitting there, and in the front door of the White House walks Meryl Streep, just by herself. So she walks right by me. She goes over and gets a glass of champagne, and she's just standing there waiting for the crowd, 5 feet from me. So I thought, okay, the gates aren't open. It's not time for us to start playing, but is there a better opportunity to play for Meryl Streep than right now? So the orchestra pulls up this piece, and we start playing for her. And it opens with the theme to Sophie's Choice, which was Marvin Hamlish. Ba-dee-da-da-da-da-da. She recognized it immediately. And so she almost dropped her glass. I just remember I kind of looked at her, and she was like, so she came over and listened to this whole thing. And she too was super emotional as we're playing this music. And it was one theme after another. So we finished this thing. And again, there's nobody in the White House. Nobody was there to take a picture, which I really am kind of upset about. It was just Meryl Streep in the orchestra. And she comes up to me afterwards. I congratulate her on her award. She said, "That was so special. And let me tell you why it was so special." And I thought she was going to say, because it was such an honor for her to be able to have this music that we chose for her. She's like, these composers that composed that music were my very close friends. Marvin Hamlish, John Barry out of Africa, which is a gorgeous score. And all of these gentlemen had just died in the last couple of years. She had lost her friends, and this whole thing for her was like a memorial to them, not to her. And it was such a beautiful thing for her to say. And she gave me a hug and she said, "Thank you so much." That just made my evening. And it was just, I just felt so grateful to be able to give this gift to a famous person who we should all be ogling over and asking for autographs. And she was the one who was grateful to us at the same time. It was such a human moment because she's a human being. All these celebrities are human beings. They're happy to be there, and they're happy to be there to have a musical moment. And we've had so many of them. Stevie Wonder has come up and sung with the orchestra. I danced in the grand foyer with Gloria Stefan, which is on, somebody put that on YouTube at one point. Steven Spielberg sat there and listened to us play the music from Lincoln in the White House. Just incredible moments that I've been so privileged to be a part of. And every time we have one of these moments, I am deeply reminded of just how amazing it is to be able to make music and to have it be such an emotional experience. These things are like the icing on the cake to have these kinds of moments in the White House. But that's why it never gets old. That's why I never feel like, oh, this again, because every day it's something new and it just hits you so deeply. And I just hope that all of you get to have similar experiences as you move on with your careers emotionally. I think it just, that's the thing that keeps me going day after day. So I think I want to leave some time for questions. I know I'm running a little over time. That took longer than I expected, but I can stay a little longer if you can. So if you want to just jump to that.
We have another 15 minutes or so.
Oh, good. Perfect.
So yeah, we're perfect. That's great. And thank you for those experiences. That's just marvelous. I was just curious, and this is just me being curious. So for the inauguration in January, it sounds like the band will be there and you'll be performing. I'm just wondering, in the age of COVID, what inauguration looks like in terms of music.
Yeah, me too. There are a number of complications this year that have prevented us from really knowing exactly what it's going to look like yet. Not the least of which is we don't know what COVID is going to look like in January 20th. Obviously, it'll still be with us. We just don't know how bad it will be. Those decisions about what it's going to look like are largely up to a couple of different committees, to include the Armed Forces Inaugural Committee, the Congressional Inaugural Committee, and most importantly, the Presidential Inaugural Committee, which is still being formed. So we don't have any of those answers yet. The band will be there in some capacity, as we have been for every inauguration since Thomas Jefferson. But I don't know if it'll probably not be what we normally have. Normally we have an 80-piece band down below the president on the swearing-in platform. The reason we have an 80-piece band is because it's usually in the 30s, and so instruments freeze, and it's very difficult to, if we had a normal band, we wouldn't have the redundancy that would allow us to play in that cold weather. So I am nervous that we're probably undoubtedly going to have a smaller band, and I don't know how small I can go without putting the live music in jeopardy, depending on how cold it's going to be. But there are scenarios anywhere from, socially distanced band on the platform to going inside. I mean, it could be in the rotunda again, like it was for Reagan's second inaugural. I don't really know what it's going to be. And so I can't make any musical plans at all until I understand how much space we're going to have and what the regulations are going to be and how many musicians I'm going to have and what that's going to look like, whether it's a band but smaller or it's a big brass ensemble. I have all kinds of different ideas, but nothing set in stone just yet. I don't know what other mitigation procedures we're going to have. It's difficult to play through masks. It's not something that we have done. I've been testing out some bell covers and they all stink. So I'm not sure if we can do that or whether we need to. We obviously will be outside in most of these scenarios, so that helps. And we will be distanced in some capacity. So you may see us out there playing without any kind of other mitigation, but maybe wearing our masks in between playing segments, during speeches and things, but all of that is still very much up in the air. It's going to be a mad rush this year to inauguration. I think we won't have any of these answers till late December. So we're going to have basically 2 to 3 weeks to plan everything that normally would have been planned over the course of 6 or 8 weeks.
Wow. Well, let's go to Sadie McNair is one of our clarinetists, and she had I thought, an interesting question about another aspect of your work with the band. Okay. Go ahead, Sadie.
Hi there. So I read in your bio that you're very involved in the education initiatives with the Marine Band. So I was just wondering if you could tell us more about them and what exactly, I mean, you already kind of mentioned this, but what inspired you to take such an active role in those programs?
Yeah, thank you, Sadie. Great question. There are two reasons why it's important to me. It's important to me personally. Just I talked about it earlier. I just love teaching, and I really love the opportunity. I don't get to do enough of it to be with students of all ages, from college all the way down to high school and elementary and middle school. The second thing is this, we're a public institution. Our mission is to just provide music for the president and for the Marine Corps. But over the last 222 years, our mission has expanded into being a public ensemble. We give concerts obviously all the time now online. We've got so much content online and YouTube and Facebook. And then I think part of that public service is education. I think being a resource for college students like you, for our colleagues in institutions all across the country, to schools of all kinds. I think we have an obligation to provide, as a professional band, resources, whether they're print resources through our Sousa project, or whether it's just hundreds and hundreds of YouTube videos, or like we were talking about earlier, references for people to listen to a professional band play repertoire you're working on, recordings, anything. And so I've taken that very seriously. It's not required by our mandate, but I consider it to be a critical part of our responsibility. And so when I became an assistant director, I thought, okay, I want to put a lot of resources to this. I want to try to take things that we already do, whether they be concerts or presentations, and find an educational outlet for them so we can distribute them, and then to do actual education programs. I started a young people's concert series when I became an assistant director, which I've been then lucky to hand off to my assistant, who's Ryan Nowlin, who's a very well-known composer and arranger. He's our assistant director, and he also taught in the public schools in Ohio for 10 years. So he's a seasoned, passionate educator. So he takes charge of a lot of our educational programs. So he and I are kind of working in tandem now, as two people are very passionate about education, to bring that to the band. And I think he'll continue, and he'll likely be the next director of the Marine Band when I retire, and he'll just take it even further than I have, which I'm super excited to watch happen. And for the musicians, some of them do have education degrees, most of them don't. So they're not trained educators, but again, by having these opportunities, by getting into the schools, by doing educational programs, they have become educators. They've learned how to teach. They've learned what works and what doesn't. And I tell them all the time, I say, look, you are qualified to do this because you're doing it. You're figuring out how to take your professional skills and your experiences and become educators through your experience. And so I think a lot of them have enjoyed that too. And last thing I'll say, Sadie, is that our educational programs, they're all established in the band, but the participation in them is voluntary. So I don't order any of our musicians to take part in them. So everything you see, from our videos to music in the schools to the young people's concerts, it's all volunteers. We did outreach in the spring when COVID hit, and then again we just finished in the fall with doing a whole outreach program, and we reached over 30,000 students through clinics and private Zoom sessions like this, through our musicians, and all of them volunteered. I had like 80% of the band volunteering from home to do these sessions on their own time because they wanted to, which is really, really cool. I'm really happy that we have people that are really excited about being a part of those programs and not being forced to.
Thank you. That's terrific. Eric Levine, I thought you had an interesting question, and it's one that a number of our students have. It's more of a practical issue. Eric, why don't you ask your question?
Sure. All right, let's see. So my question is, as an experienced musician and conductor, do you find yourself getting more nervous than normal, knowing there may be like extremely important figures in your audience?
Yeah, interesting question, Eric. I'd like to say yes, because I think being nervous is an important part of being a musician and being a human. I think when you stop being nervous or stop having anticipation for something you're doing that's important, I think it's a bad thing. I think it's important to be kind of connected to it in that way, with that kind of nervous energy. You don't want your nerves you want to be able to control your nerves to a point where they don't get in the way of your ability to execute, but you don't want to be disconnected from that feeling. But being honest with you, I will say that I get less nervous now than I used to. I think it's because I've had quite a bit of experience now where you're playing for really high profile kind of events, whether it be the president or celebrities or famous musicians. Yo-Yo Ma snuck into the orchestra about 5 years ago. We were at the White House and he just took somebody's cello and like sat there, and I looked down and there's Yo-Yo Ma playing, in the orchestra right under my nose. Like, ah! And then last year we went on tour to LA. We have a big friendship with John Williams. He's a close friend of the band. He's conducted the band on multiple occasions. We actually have a special project coming out in a couple of months. Sean, keep your eyes open for some previously unreleased recordings that are going to be coming out for everybody. But we went to LA last year on tour, and I called John's folks and I said, would John like to come and conduct the band again while we're in his backyard? He said yes. But he wanted to come out at the end. He wanted to be a complete surprise. So no one knew, not at the hall, not the audience, that he was going to be there. He showed up at intermission and he said to me, he said, Jason, why don't you just conduct I programmed all John Williams on the second half because I wanted to kind of prime the pump. But he's like, you just conduct all the pieces and I'll come out and conduct 1941 and Imperial March at the end. So I said, so Maestro, you're going to have me conduct all of your music while you watch me from backstage. And then you'll come out and conduct your march. Is that what you're saying? He's like, yeah, that'd be great. It's like, great for who, you know? So I was nervous then. I was really nervous then to conduct John Williams music while he's watching me through the little window backstage, and then coming out to actually conduct himself, and knowing that that was going to be much more interesting for the audience than me up there. But in general, I don't get quite as nervous anymore. Because I've just done it so much, I have confidence that I can do it and I can deliver and it's going to be fine. But when I was a little younger, when I was getting to this point, I absolutely got nervous in those big spots. I still do get nervous for doing things for the first time. So if I have to give a speech or a special presentation that I had not done a lot, and there's a lot to remember, I've got to memorize things, or I've got to make sure that I do it the right way, or there's somebody that I'm trying to make a good impression on, or the stakes really high, I do get nervous for that. It's the stuff that I do a lot, that I've done over and over again, that I don't get as nervous for anymore. And I think that is a good thing, even though I still like being nervous for the reasons I talked about. The fact that I can take a break, my brain can take a break on some of the performance stuff that I do that I'm more confident in. It's a sense of relief in some ways, that I don't have to be nervous all the time, only for certain spots that I'm not quite as sure that I know exactly what I'm going to do.
Great, thank you for that. Adam Kellestad also had an interesting question, I thought. Adam?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Adam.
Hi. My question was, what is it that your band has taught you about making music?
Wow, Adam, that's a good question. I think my band has taught me, not so much taught me, but reminded me the importance of humility. I'm a colonel in the Marine Corps. I can technically tell anybody to do anything as long as it's legal, and they would do it. But I rarely do that because I'm just another cog in the wheel. I'm just another human in this band, and I'm the one that doesn't make any sound, right? So what I do up on the podium, there is a function to it, but I'm not the one making the music. I'm not the one really truly kind of making that connection with the audience. It's all the musicians who are playing. It's all these extremely talented men and women who make up the band and who kind of are the heart and soul of the music that we make. And so I think being with them every day and hearing what they're capable of and seeing what they're capable of every day and knowing how much more capable many of them are than I am has taught me, even despite what I wear on my collar and all the experiences I've had, to just stay humble and stay grateful for this opportunity. And the fact that I won't be doing it forever. I'm going to move on someday to something else sooner rather than later. I will never, ever have the opportunity to work with musicians of this caliber again and to have these experiences that we've been talking about for this hour again. It'll be it. There'll be a chapter in my history that I'll always have, but I'll never experience it again. So being grateful and being humble for this opportunity is something this organization and the people in it have taught me every single day and reminded me of. And because I've done it for 23 years now, and I've had that every day, I feel like it's kind of gotten burned into my psyche. I feel like no matter where I end up or what I do moving forward, I will never forget the feeling of this and how special it is. And so I would say that's probably the most important thing it's taught me as a human being and as a person.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Well, we are pretty much at the end of our time here. One thing I would like to do, Colonel Fettig, is everyone, is just to get a picture of everyone. Can we do that, everyone? I'll give you a heads up here so you can all smile at the same time. All right. Hang on a second. All right. 1, 2, 3. All right. We are good. And everyone, can we please thank Colonel Fettig for being so kind with his time? A loud, thunderous applause. You hear that?
I do hear it. I can see it too.
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure, and I can't even explain how I think valuable just hearing your experiences and our other speakers, just to hear how you're at a very successful level with what you're doing, but that you were very much like all of our students at one point in your life, and just hearing that I love the idea that that the future is just so open for everyone, and just the idea of working hard and just following whatever path makes sense in your life. I think that's just tremendous. And so students, I hope that you'll always remember the lessons that you've heard here today. And
yeah, and I'll say one more thing. Obviously we're in this awful time, and I'm sure you're miserable in many ways, not being able to be a normal life and be with each other. But it goes without saying, but just remember, this is all going to pass at some point. They say every rain cloud runs out of rain at some point. This will pass. You'll get back to school. You'll get back to normal life. And I'm thinking about this my way too. This has been the most challenging year of my career for so many ways. I don't have time to go into it, but it's been very challenging. And so, but we got through it. We're getting through it, and you're all getting through it. And so it's certainly going to be a moment of resilience moving forward. It's like, hey, if I got through 2020 and that crap we dealt with, anything, throw what else you want at me, because I can handle it. So look forward to getting back together. It's going to happen. Appreciate it when you do. Hope it's a renewed sense of, yes, this is why we're here and doing this. And keep your chin up and stay healthy. Hang on for a little bit further. It was really nice to be able to talk to you all today, and I really appreciate you tuning in. And I'm honored to be a part of such an impressive slate of speakers that your professor has brought in for you during these special times. So thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. We hope to see you down in North Carolina at some point.
Can't wait. It'll be this coming fall, actually. We will be, if all goes well with COVID, we'll be coming through the Southeast this fall, driving straight through, and hopefully we'll be close to your neck of the woods. And please do come out and see us at a concert and come up and say hello.
Will do. Thanks again, Colonel, and thank you, everyone. Good to see you all.
Take care. Bye,
Take
everybody.
care. Bye-bye.